Good morning, everyone. This is Nem. Look, let's do a wave. Oh no, I turned around. I'm terrible at this. So let's cover 7.1 Blackmage. Things are different. Let's take a look at the patch notes. Hold on, I've got a lot of tabs open. Hold on. There we go. So 7.1 Blackmage. Flare cast time has been reduced from 4 to 3 seconds. Leylines has 2 charges. Despair. The trait Enhanced Astral Fire will now make the cast time instant, and it pains me to say this, but Enhanced Enochian 4 has been reduced from 33 to 32%. These are the changes Black Mage has received. That's a lot to take in. It's not what we expected for the most part, and it has a pretty interesting impact on Black Mage. So let's open up some other tabs. We're going to go to the Final Fantasy XIV Blackmage Play Guide, which is here. So let's take a look. One at a time here. Flare cast time has been reduced from 4 to 3 seconds. This helps with our AoE rotation. It doesn't fix the issue of High Blizzard 2 and High Blizzard 3, right? Still really weak potency. Still really long cast times. It's still High Blizzard, Freeze, Fire 3, right? But now we have shorter cast time on Flare, so it doesn't impact when we're normally doing our AoE rotation, the triple casts and everything. But you know, yeah, actual cast time is shorter now. This actually has an interesting impact on ultimates, where right now the 4-second cast timing actually lines up really well for things like Uwu, ultimate weapons for frame. That's no longer the case, so I don't know what I'm going to do about my rotation there. So that's Flare. Leylines has 2 charges. Now, this sounds better than it is, but it is good. So Leylines has 2 charges. It still has the same cooldown. It's just when you use Leylines, it starts the cooldown of that Leylines, right? Which does tick during retrace. You don't have to retrace. Right, hold on. Which also, by the way, retrace has a 40-second cooldown, interestingly enough. So you so apparently, like, Leylines is actually on cooldown right now. Doesn't have a good visualization for it because you're looking at the retrace cooldown for most of that, which I think feels not great. But once the Leylines disappear, you can see that we are already ticking down our cooldown, which gives us just the flexibility to use a second Leylines. You can put them together, you can spread them out, and ultimately what this means is that you can stop the DPS drop that happens over the course of a fight a little bit better by having that buff come back to you more frequently. What does this really end up meaning? It really ends up meaning that you get like 2 extra Leylines casts over the course of a fight. It's not like Leylines is going to be there for you every minute of the fight, always, forever. It really just is a couple of extra Leylines because of the way charges work. Because you don't regen charges, both of them at the same time. If you use both, it's got to finish the cooldown on one charge before it will start the cooldown on another. So this is a DPS improvement for sure. This is definitely good, but is it enough, right? Is it enough? And that's what we're trying to find out. So yeah, 2 charges on Leylines is definitely a gain. Despair is instant cast with Astral Fire. So if we go to the play guide for Blackmage and we look up Enhanced Astral Fire, Enhanced Astral Fire grants a stack of Astral Soul upon landing Fire 4 or Flare. Maximum 6 stacks, and allows for immediate casting of Despair now. So Despair is here. This actually we have some questions about, so let's experiment a bit. So if we cast Fire 4 with just one sticker, do we need all 6 stickers? We don't. Despair is just always insta-cast. It still has an MP cost. Despair is now at level 100, just always insta-cast. So what does that mean? That is an effective buff. That is a potency per second improvement. I'm gonna open up Discord and kind of show you guys some preliminary notes, and then we're gonna explore the balance to see what's been said since I fell asleep last night. So let's take a look here. Last night we had some quick math done by Delwyn while everyone was freaking out. And just some quick math. This might not be totally accurate. It might not be totally fleshed out, but um, if we take a look here, he's got a lot of numbers. You have to attribute for like the lowest potency per second, right? And this is at like a 0 spell speed, so worst case scenario. He's saying that I don't know. I don't really know what he's saying. I'm gonna be honest, but he's saying the sum of 34.8 seconds before it was zero point 0.5 seconds for despair, which makes instant despair at least a 1.4% rotation buff. It looks like, and we'll look for more numbers as well. But then it's a 1% debuff to Nokian, but less than a 1% overall nerf. Is that accurate? I don't really know. But we'll dig into it. So it looks like Despair as an instant cast is a buff. And the way that I look at it is that they're trying to buff Blackmage not through damage, but through how fast they can get through their rotation. Because if you're in ley lines a little bit more often, that's going to be a buff. And some things that happen with Blackmage is that we usually hit this window of triple cast where we triple cast like a Fire 4, a Despair, and Flare Star, and that's no longer the case, right? Because now what we end up doing is we can use a triple cast on Fire 4, Flare Star, and then Despair's already insta-cast, right? So now we have to move our triple casts around. So what I think we're going to end up seeing is triple cast being used to pair together the instant despair. So you'll be like Fire 4, Despair, and then that last triple cast will be used on Flare Star. Let's see if I can kind of prove that out. So usually we would wait until this last sticker for that. Now I think what we'll do is use it here. Fire 4, Despair, Flare Star. Those are a lot of instant casts. It's definitely going to be a DPS improvement. Act isn't working right now, so I really can't give you hard numbers on seeing what I'm doing now versus what I was doing before. But it is an improvement. Now here's the thing. Instant Cast Despair fixes the issue that we didn't really have enough time to hard cast at low spell speed all these Fire 4s, Despair, Flare Star, without mechanics getting in the way. It made the game very, very difficult for Blackmage. That is fixed with Instant Cast Despair, 100%. That's a massive like quality of life for a lot of Blackmages who are like low spell speed, M4S, and the improved ley lines is going to help sustain our DPS drop that happens halfway through a lot of fights. So these are good changes, but are they good enough changes? That's what everyone wants to know, right? And think about it, right? Yoshi P not nerfing Pictomancer, right? Let's take a look here. This is the wrong thread. Let's see if we can find it. Is it? I don't think I can find it right now. But Yoshi P said he was instead of nerfing Pictomancer, he was going to bring all jobs up to the level of Pictomancer. Now here's some metrics that we know from before the changes. Pictomancer was roughly 15% ahead of Blackmage in situations where it's just out of encounter parsing. So full uptime scenario, perfect uptime for both jobs. It's about 15% better output. In an ultimate scenario, you're looking at roughly, and these numbers are hard, but roughly 20% is what it looks like for Pictomancer because of movement, downtime, and things like that that Black Mage struggles with. So you're going to not have perfect damage, right? Millisecond lost here, millisecond lost there. So because of that, traditionally, Pictomancer has been 20% ahead of Black Mage in high-end content, 15% ahead in just a vacuum. Do these numbers bridge the gap? This is what these numbers do. They allow you to go lower spell speed. A lot of the spell speed melds that we just put on in a recent video, we can probably get rid of now, right? Why? Because Despair no longer has a cast timer. We don't need those spell speed quite as much. We can play it closer to the chest. So that's a little bit of a DPS improvement. With the ley lines buffing our spell speed as well, doubly so, right? Like more ley lines a little bit more often, it helps. It helps. But is that 15%? I think that the Enochian nerf, the 1% in these patch notes, is confusing to me. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense because if we remember traditionally, right, if we go to look at all the jobs for magical ranged, right, hold on. So how it traditionally has been done since Shadowbringers, really, is that the jobs have been balanced around what they bring to a party composition. Summoner's DPS and Red Mage's DPS have always, well, for the most part, there's some exceptions, for the most part have been lower DPS than Black Mage because they have reses. Or, like with Red Mage, it has a raid-wide party buff, right? So if you're buffing other players, the devs have traditionally lowered the damage of that job to make sure that jobs who don't buff other players, don't bring that kind of party-wide DPS increase, have a personal DPS increase to make up for it. So Red Mage might be lower damage, but they're really good at rezzing people, and they buff the other DPS players, and the tanks and the supports, right? Summoner's the same thing. Summoner's DPS is usually higher than Red Mage, but they have a res, so they're lower than Black Mage. Pictomancer has a raid-wide party buff. It buffs the other DPS, but does not have a res, so it seems like that would place them around Summoner, or maybe slightly above Summoner, because no res, but they do have a party buff. Where does it fall? But what we're seeing is that Pictomancer is ahead of Black Mage. But Black Mage doesn't have any party buffs. It just has personal DPS. So it goes against the design philosophy of the game. And because of that, when you're playing a difficult job like Black Mage, people want to feel rewarded for the time investment. They want to feel like when they do hard things, they get good rewards. They want to feel like the depth and mastery that this job takes is worth it. And so what that realistically would be acceptable at is that the job needs to feel good to play. It needs to achieve the fantasy of feeling like a Black Mage, and it needs to be a competitive or acceptable job. That means if Black Mage and Pictomancer did roughly the same damage, people wouldn't complain quite so hard as they're complaining. However, Pictomancer is so far ahead of Black Mage that a lot of parties, at least on NA, especially parsing parties or high-end parties, speed kill parties, they refuse to take anything but Pictomancer. So because of that sort of community perception around efficiency, how human beings will kind of optimize the fun out of a game, they're optimizing out Black Mage. And Black Mage players feel a bit slighted because they've invested years to get good at this job. It's not a job they just picked up and were good at. They've invested a long time, a lot of thought, energy, and mathematics to understand the job, right? So because of that, a lot of people feel like these changes aren't really intelligently implemented. Personally, what do I feel? I feel like they don't know what they're doing with Blackmage. I think the introduction of Picto threw them for a loop, and they're not prepared for it. I think they don't know what they're doing, to be honest. Unless these changes are preparing us for 8.0 changes, which sounds like copium, I know. I don't believe that's the case. I don't think there's like some Grandmaster plan of 8.0 Blackmage requires 7.1 Blackmage changes to kind of ease us into it. I don't really believe that, but it could make sense if it were the case. However, regardless, it just seems like they don't really know what they're trying to do with Black Mage, where it fits into the game as a job, and ultimately it just feels like things are really poorly balanced. And the sad part about that is that that's going to be the biggest memory of Dawntrail. We're going to remember like how we felt about the story. We're going to feel that the battle content was really, really good. And then we're going to feel like job balance was the worst it's ever been, or at least the worst it's ever been since maybe like Heaven's Ward or Stormblood. And that's a big deal because this expansion, like, it's kind of sad that we're getting like the best battle content we've ever had and the worst job balance we've ever had, or in a long time, anyways, because those two things work hand in hand in tandem. So Black Mage, it's fine. It's going to be able to clear Ultimate, I believe. It's going to be able to do all the content, yes. But there's just no logical reason why a competitive group or a group that wants an easier time would not just take a Pictomancer. But then that begs the argument, what about double caster? Well, my static actually is a double caster static. Before this change, we do Picto and Black Mage. And uh, we did skip Sunrise and M4S and all that, regularly. Was it more damage overall? I don't know if it was or not. Um, Sometimes it was. And now with this, is it worth bringing two casters instead of two melee? Maybe it's fine to do. They buffed a lot of other melee jobs in the patch notes, so like Dragoon got some buffs. Machinist and Dancer got buffs. Ninja got some small buffs. So I don't know, honestly. Like, we'll have to wait and see how the metrics play out. But it seems like maybe it'll be okay to do double caster more frequently for even a competitive group. But I don't know for sure yet. It is hard to say. So this does also beg the question, right? So we're getting improvements on Black Mage. We're still going to be behind Pictomancer, um, from what we can tell. Sorry, from what we can tell. But what are we looking at for improvements? We're seeing improvements on potency per second to spare, 2 extra casts or so of ley lines, for more spell speed more frequently. We are seeing less dependency on spell speed melds. Okay, fine, great. But we are also seeing perhaps the return, in a small way, the return of non-standard Black Mage. So just kicking around some ideas last night in the Balance Discord, right? We have a couple of potential non-standards. They have 7 Fire 4s here. I don't really know why. But you can see after completing like a regular line, you can end on like after Flare Star, you would despair for the instant cast. You can transpose Lucid Dreaming, Paradox, Ice Paradox, Zetna Thunder, transpose again, Fire 3 instacast from previous Fire Paradox here, right? And then instacast Despair into a Mana Font. The problem with this is that it's dependent on what? Mana Font. Mana Font is a long cooldown. Mana Font is a 100-second cooldown. So every 100 seconds, if you really, really want to, you could do a non-standard line. Is it a potency gain? Maybe. Probably. But I'm not 100% sure about that. So lastly, what I'm going to go through with you guys is going into the balance itself, and let's taking a look at some of the things people have said. Do we have any sort of comments made yet for Blackmage resources? Well, looks like we don't have 7.1 as a posting yet on the main page. We're still 7.05, which means we're still figuring it out. We're still talking about it, which is totally fine. Totally fine. So with the Blackmage changes, do we see anything new? Don't think so. Looks like people just kind of settled on being unhappy about it, and or the argument that you should play Blackmage for fun, which is kind of dismissive of the design choice issues in my opinion. I think it's totally okay to be upset and totally okay not to be upset. Overall, people overestimate the value of missing a few seconds of ley lines, thus often also overvalue the second charge of ley lines. Rika, as always, with wisdom. Nice to have, but nothing massive. See the argument for pre-pull versus not in all the fights. The biggest value definitely comes from 4-star, a big deal. Yeah. 4-second pre-pull is still standard. Looks like, so not a whole lot of changes with ley lines despite the second charge. And also, how likely is it that you're going to get full uptime in both ley lines? Probably not that likely, most cases. So, yeah, a lot of black mages are pretty upset in this Discord, and it's understandable. Look, Square Enix hates us. I just think they don't know what they're doing, honestly. I really don't think they understand what they're doing. They have some metrics and some practices behind the scenes that they're following to account for like these small 1% changes. But when I say I don't think they know what they're doing with Blackmage, it's honestly because they keep valuing it lower than Pictomancer. They don't want it to become too powerful, right? But the thing about Blackmage is even if it becomes a little bit too powerful where it's like the best choice for damage, it will, other casters do not lose their spot in Party Finder because they bring something else other than damage to the table. So that means like casual groups are still going to want like red mage and summoner. Some groups are going to like if you have a player that doesn't want to learn the mind numbingness of black mage to do the most extra a little extra damage, it's perfectly acceptable to bring raid wide buffs so other people get buffed. It's perfectly acceptable to bring res, right? Those are the benefits of the other jobs, and they don't lose that by black mage's damage being brought to or even slightly above the level of Pictomancer. That's why I say I don't think they know what they're doing, because the numbers are off. It's really hard to kind of quantify some of the raid wide buff damage sometimes from other jobs, sure. But I think we have close enough metrics as it is anyways that it still doesn't matter. That would be a weak argument to make. So I'm gonna guess we're gonna be below all the melees with these changes. If Black Mage is below all the melees with these changes too, that will just solidify that double caster is not the way to go. And if that's the case, well, I don't think that will be true though, because some melees didn't really get any buffs, like Reaper. So, but yeah, it's rough out here right now, guys. The design of around job balance hasn't been this bad in a very long time. Endwalker's job balance was like sometimes good, sometimes bad. I think ultimately this is just going to bring it out that they need to nerf Pictomancer. I think Pictomancer is like oppressively strong, brings raid wide buffs, brings personal damage, and I think that removes the need for Black Mage to even be in the game. It's really just there because well, it's a Final Fantasy game. You have to have Black Mage, and that just feels kind of lame. And we've dealt with the same kind of thing with Fizz range players before, where you're like, well, they struggle with the balance of those jobs as well for some reason. I don't know if it's like they just they struggle with jobs that are supposed to have uptime due to being far away. But Blackmage is, again, remember, Blackmage is a melee DPS, right? That's what I always say. Blackmage is a melee DPS. It sometimes loses uptime due to movement, just like a melee DPS, and it does higher damage than the other casters, just like a melee DPS. But they've stopped balancing it that way, um, and so now I'm confused. I'm confused at what they're trying to accomplish. I will definitely revisit this topic when we have better numbers and more experience with the fights, um, to kind of figure out what's going on. And this means we probably got to redo melds. I don't want to redo melds, so that's a huge pain in the ass as well. If you don't want to redo your melds because you're not like trying to parse, you don't have to. You can sit on like the spell speed that we have on here. That's fine. I just know that I probably am gonna remove those. Uh, so unfortunate that we just changed them not that long ago, but it's okay. Anyways, these are my thoughts on the changes. I think they are good changes. Just they don't fix Thunder as an issue. Thunder is still a problem. Our AoE rotation still has some useless spells in it that just feel like button bloat. Um, and Yeah, so there's still some issues with Black Mage this time around. Flare Star not being instant cast, I guess, is okay because Despair is instant cast, so our triples can like hit that spell more often. We no longer ever need to instant cast a Despair. That is a big change for sure. Um, I'm just so curious how this is going to play out numbers wise. It's definitely an improvement. I just don't think it's the improvement that we're looking for at the high end. For the mid-range black mages, hey, this is a huge win for everyone who's like a casual black mage enjoyer. Huge win. Um, However, for the overall job balance, there's definitely some glaring issues that need attention, and I just don't know what it's going to take for Square Enix to take this a little bit more seriously, to care a little bit more about caster job balance, and kind of see that they shot themselves in the foot by introducing Picto the way that they did. They either need to remove Picto's raid-wide buff, they need to either nerf Picto's personal damage, or they need to buff Black Mage, and there's no way around that. All right. Thanks for hanging out, guys, and I'll see you next time. Like and subscribe and all that, blah, 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 blah. Okay, bye.